Redditors who have hired a private investigator, what did you find out? I had a girlfriend that worked for one for a while. She said that the majority of their work was insurance scams. She took a lot of pictures of guys who said they were hurt on the job playing golf and surfing and such. There seems to be a lot of that in this thread. Sometimes I wonder if I'd be able to pull off such a scam because any investigator would only be able to determine that after the accident I didn't post my life on social media and I almost never engaged in strenuous activity outside the house. So no change there then. One of my jobs is to search for long-lost relatives, usually several generations ago. Typically, the case is about old plots of land where I should track down owners, or their heirs, to update the land registry because a state wants to build there something. Let me tell you, the amount of information you can find on Google and in public records is astounding if you know where to look. Where do we look? Basic search in the States? Obits, Find My Grave, Billion Graves, Family Search, Ancestry, White Pages. Europe? It is trickier due to privacy laws, but Ancestry, MyHeritage, newspapers, city directories and simple Googling. Find My Grave. Close, it's Find a Grave. Find My Grave would be much more cryptic service. Even in 2020 I struggle to picture a private investigator as anything but a man in a beige trench coat and a trilby. That's the only pie image I've had as I've been reading through the comments laughing my butt off. I was a private investigator for a little bit. Most work pies do is searching financial/court records and serving documents. But one time I was paid by wealthy parents to stake out their college senior who had stopped returning their calls. They were worried about her. These parents paid like $40,000 for round-the-clock monitoring just to find out their daughter dropped out of school and was a full-time ski bum. BTW stakeouts are mostly just sitting in your car reading all day. I have always wondered, how do you pee discreetly on a stakeout? Edit, I'm a guy. I've pissed into bottles before. I'm wondering about the discreetly part. How do you do it so it isn't obvious to people walking by on the street? I would like to know the answer to this. I'd also like to know, if you're reading in your car, how do you make sure you don't miss something happening? Like I imagine glancing up every so often, but what if the person you're investigating moves while you're not glancing up? I'd assume you'd park close enough to hear when they left the building or something. And I doubt he was invested in the reading. It's more just having something to occupy your time while you wait. Oh man, I'd make a lousy pie if I read in my car. I get way too focused. I'd start reading and look up to see it 6 hours later and the suspect is long gone. If we weren't supposed to piss in empties, God wouldn't have given us a tapered vagina. Way of the road. Had a babysitter we thought was stealing from us. Luckily our neighbor was a pie couple and they ran a background check for $10. Babysitter had a string of DUIs and a few days before a large fine was due, my camera disappeared. He also stole money from my kids' piggy banks. He sort of disappeared but was also really into Instagram, so I surreptitiously followed him. He started babysitting again for a single mom, easy target, and posted a lot of fun pics with this family. I tracked down the mom and sent her a long email detailing out his whole scam. She said we were right and it was clear he'd been stealing from her business. He has since gone underground, but I still Google him regularly to see what he's up to. He's been able to avoid arrests for a while now. Good thing he was gone before anything worse happened. So I learned a lot about con artists from this experience. He was not a child molester and was a genuinely nice and likable person. Very talented photographer and really good with kids. It was almost as if he thought he deserved what he stole because he had such a big heart. When I say he targeted single moms, he genuinely helped them as well by watching their kids and going the extra mile to be helpful. It was a very complex situation, and I think that's common with these cases. People truly like the con artist and feel almost embarrassed to have been taken advantage of, so they often just go unreported. The thing is, to be a good con artist you have to be likable and inspire trust. That's the dichotomy. I think you make some good points. To be a good con artist you have to be highly manipulative and emotionally intelligent. Some people are so good at manipulating, they can even lie to themselves. To the point that they believe they are truly a good person. It's a really dangerous combination. People are so complicated and nothing is completely black and white. I don't think he would harm your kids, but he might have stepped up his game to steal more and more from you. My law firm had a bad faith insurance case several years ago. A guy had gotten hurt at work. He claimed he was disabled because he hurt his back, and could not lift anything or really engage in any type of physical activity. His disability insurance carrier failed to handle the claim and pay him what was owed. There was a potential for relatively large damages. In fact, the carrier filed in the court case what is known as an offer to confess judgment. It's a way of agreeing to let judgment be taken for that amount. The plaintiff can accept the offer or reject it. However, if he rejects the offer, he is responsible for the defendant's attorney's fees if the verdict ends up being less than the amount of the offer to confess judgment. The offer in this case was $750,000. He rejected the offer. A few weeks later, our PI found out that the plaintiff bowled every week. The PI got video of the plaintiff bowling and copies of his score sheets going several years back through the date of the accident. It was clear he really was not disabled. He also found that plaintiff had been in a car wreck and was making identical injury claims to the other driver's insurance carrier. We filed a motion with the court to dismiss the lawsuit based upon fraud and perjury. The court set the motion for a hearing, but before that happened, the plaintiff dismissed his lawsuit. So the guy turned down $750,000? Only to get nothing? Less than nothing. He had to pay for their lawyers, every penny, plus his own, so long as the lawyers cost less than $750,000. Those fees would likely include everything for the PI, as well. So, in the end, he paid for a guy to catch him committing fraud. Edit. Well, this is the most I've ever seen my phone blow up. I'm mostly speaking on assumption that it would be counted against him for voluntary dismissal, but the comments are right. It depends on where he is and how they treat that sort of thing. Also, if I remember correctly from the few times I've talked to people who have gotten lawyers who take the case based on if they win, then him voluntarily dismissing would count against him in his contract, so he would be liable for any fees. But other than that, he didn't get charged with fraud? That would require the local DA to get involved, and, if the area was relatively wealthy, it's possible the amount attempted to be defrauded wasn't enough for him/her to care. Happens all the time. I had/have a blown disc, and had pretty nasty sciatica for about a year. I could still ski and hike, but I'd pay dearly for it. The mere thought of bowling made me nauseous at the time. I have had sciatica on/off for 19 years now from a herniated disc between my L5/S1. Tying my shoes hurts when I get a flare-up. My parents hired a private investigator to find out who my online boyfriend was when I was 13. The PI came back and told us he was just a fat-ass 13-year-old. LMFAO. When I was 14, my parents suspected that the woman I was talking to was much older than she said. I'd spoken to her brother and sister, so I was confident she was who she said she was. I became friends with her older brother. I wish my parents had hired a PI based on their suspicions. Her older brother was her son, her sister her daughter. The pictures she sent me were of her daughter. I was in my 20s before I found out. What the F? I found out after Googling her. She was dead. I sent a really angry message to her son. I don't fault her daughter, she was young. Quentin knew exactly how old I was. He wrote an essay on Hamlet for me while I was in high school. He was college-aged and should have known how effed up what was going on was. I wasted so much time talking to a pedophile, never mind the things that make my skin crawl. Funniest answer in the thread. I vividly remember having to ask what roly-poly meant. We didn't have webcams then. My grandmother's first boyfriend after my grandfather died said he was a retired cop and a veteran. They enjoyed dancing to country music together, and bought a new car, in her name though, even though she can't drive anymore. My uncles hired a PI. Turns out, that old bastard had a habit of shacking up with widows and bleeding them dry. The boyfriend, not the PI. Not me, but my friend, also a lawyer like myself, was handling a contested will. Normally, very, very straightforward. Anyway, woman in her mid-30s husband just died. He was in his late 70s or early 80s, can't remember. Still nothing fishy because hey, nothing wrong with an adult transaction where a very good-looking young woman sleeps with a rich old man in exchange for the use of his credit cards. Here's where it gets slightly concerning. 2 months before his death, he rewrote his will and left everything to her instead of his 5 kids. Around $35 million in cash and assets. And then it gets downright thriller movie-ish. Turns out, the woman is a 5-time widow. Now you may be saying, sure, that could just be the unluckiest, most pitiful widow in the world, but it gets even fishier. In all 5 of her marriages, the wills were rewritten just months before their deaths, and every cause of death was natural causes despite not all of them being as old as the latest husband, and toxicology tests were not carried out during any of the 5 autopsies. But wait. There's more. It turned out that the widow was never home during any of the deaths, yet insisted the autopsies were carried out at the same institute. But wait, still more. Widow is also distantly related to one of the higher-ups at the institute. Well, what happened after? They're still contesting. A lot of cases got put on hold due to COVID, massive backlogs in court. There's been a few added developments here and there, but there's been a lot of underhanded tactics by both sides in the meantime. Edit, just remembered that a little more drama is happening. The lawyer who drafted both the old as well as the new will is being called as a witness. Depending on Cross, there may be grounds for him losing his license. I mean, it all sounds suspiciously like she's being a black widow here. How is law enforcement not looking into this? I think it's going to end up as one of those cases where sure, everybody knows she's a black widow, but too difficult to actually prove in court. I'm interested to see how this carries on. Law enforcement here's a bit of a joke. That sounds extremely messed up. She probably caused 5 men to die. I really hope she ends up in jail and doesn't hurt anybody else. Assuming that all 5 bodies are already buried and partially to fully decomposed, would there be no way to see whether they died by poison or something? Too many factors seem fishy in that story for her not to be guilty of something. I don't know. I've never done an actual murder case, just a few manslaughter cases, so I'm not familiar with the medical procedure for evidence for an actual murder. I need to know more. Did your uncles tell your grandma? Did she leave him? Yeah, my uncles showed the evidence to my grandma, removed her from the situation and told the sob to beat it or else. Thankfully he hadn't been around long enough to steal much other than the time and innocence of an old widow. Good thing grandma wasn't stubborn about it. She was heartbroken though. She seemed so happy when I went to visit them before the pie. She giddily talked about how he came up to her at a seniors mixer and asked her if she wanted to dance. Something my grandfather wasn't in shape for while I knew him. She was like a teenager again. Happy ending is, she has a new partner now who seems to have passed my uncle's scrutiny. I'm unaware if they hired a pie this time around, but at least my grandmother is a little wiser about red flags. Go uncle. Not me, but my grandfather did. He was separated from his brother when the Japanese occupied China. My grandfather safely made it to Hong Kong and eventually to Canada. His brother made it to Singapore or Malaysia according to family friends back then. So my grandfather spent a good 5 years or so working with a pie to find his brother so they can be reunited. Sadly, with just a picture and the fact many people died in the war, it wasn't much to go on. My grandfather is still alive and always thinks of his brother. It's his wish to see him one more time. Edit, provided response in thread below and copied here. Well, thank you everyone for the kind wishes and suggestions. To let you know, my grandfather worked with this pie many years ago, say between 1999-2004-ish? And maybe a few touch points here and there in the years after. My grandfather was disheartened because he made many trips to Asia over the years thinking this is it. But it just cost more money and got his hopes up. No clue if the brother married, if he even made it to Singapore or Malaysia, or it can be even outside of Asia altogether. Not even sure if he's alive. He would be in his late 80s now, estimated. He has not spoken about it directly with me, just with my mom, his daughter. If I'm being honest, we haven't exactly encouraged him to continue the search either. All my aunts and uncles tell him to move on, and enjoy his time in peace rather than in constant yearning. I don't have the status in the family to overstep my mom and her siblings and start bringing up the past and asking him to consider a DNA kit. If I do, I'd have to do it in secret and consider the emotional investment my grandfather may make. He's not living unhappily by any means. He has a great life and quite accomplished with raising 6 kids to have families/homes of their own. We each take care of him. He has tons of friends, likes to cook, use WeChat to talk to anyone and everyone, travel, pre-COVID, and read. He does want to see his brother, but as time goes by the memory and drive becomes fainter and eventually the day-to-day life just makes it easier for him to accept the circumstances. Oh man, that's heartbreaking. Have you tried posting online? Do you recognize this man? With the image and a brief story? No. My grandpa is 83 to 84 this year. This happened when he was a little boy, maybe 7 to 9 years old. The reason why I'm giving ranges is because back then many people were so poor that they didn't keep track of birthdays, and my grandfather's dad had to make up a fake birthday for him when they arrived in HK. The brother is older by a few years. Not sure how much older because my grandpa doesn't really like to talk about him. The only picture my grandpa had is of them when they were kids. The pie had to rely on the picture, family last name, a few nicknames the brother had and word of mouth from other Chinese families from the same village. It's not surprising he wasn't successful in the search. My grandfather made several trips to ESE Asia to do the search himself. Hey, I don't know if this can help, but the German Red Cross has a missing person location service. They also search worldwide trying to trace, reconnect and reunite people who have been separated because of wars. They are working with the International Red Cross and Red Crescent. Here is a link, maybe they can be of help. Web link. There is also a reality TV show on German TV about reuniting them. Never watched it outside of randomly changing channels, but the moderator always travels for a good of 5 countries sometimes to find someone. Now you have Reddit. The Singapore subreddit is quite active. I tried to stay in Europe doing this exact thing when I was younger, helping people track down relatives. Did it for myself, figured I could do it for others. Sadly never got clients or knew how to market. One can dream. Thank you for watching. If you like our videos, please like them on YouTube. And share them with your friends. Please subscribe to be the first to know about Red Rabbit Readers' new videos. We welcome your comments below. Another of our videos will begin shortly.